Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentlemen. I'm Sid Part2, joining me today is...
A Geek for Fun.
And Steve.
So we're here tonight to talk about the cuckification of Star Wars, the absolute destruction of our childhoods that was ruined. They took George Lucas's vision and just pissed all over it. Just to serve the SJW elites, right, guys?
Absolutely, 100%. They raped our childhood.
Of Geeky Gentlemen ever.
Alfie, what are we talking about today?
Today we are talking about the Dark Horse comic series from 1991 to 1992, Star Wars: Dark Empire.
Yes, we're doing the first volume of it. It was apparently a trilogy in and of itself. So this is interesting because I've always heard about Legend stuff, but I've mostly managed to stay away from it one way or another. Not necessarily intentionally, but sometimes intentionally. So this is, I think, one of the only Legends comics I've ever read. So what made you want to talk about it?
Well, a new Star Wars movie came out, and a lot of people
a
new Star Wars movie? What?
I know.
What
a
are
lot
you
of people have been
talking about?
talking about kind of not knowing where this franchise is going, feeling like there's not a sense of direction, feeling like maybe the love affair with it is ended, or maybe something new is going to happen. It just feels like it's a bit of a time of uncertainty compared to even just a couple of years ago with the Disney Plus series. So it felt like a good time to go back to not when the movies finished, but when the series became a franchise proper. And that's why I come back to this comic, because this comic was the first expanded universe piece of media. This was the first thing that was this is part of the story and we are adding on to it. There had been other things prior. There had been Marvel comics, which were, never really viewed as their own sort of continuity. There had been adaptions of the movies, there have been stuff like that, but it had never been something where it was a concentrated effort from we are going to build something. So this came out, and this was in concurrent development with Timothy Zahn's Heir to the Empire novel, which is what most people view as the true start of the expanded universe. But that novel only existed because they were thinking about making a novel adaptation of this, and then they decided to just make it its own story. And as a result, these two kind of have a lot of overlap, and then there's some contradictions, and then a lot of the other AU stories that follow kind of didn't know what to do with this thing. They kind of didn't know how to handle that. There was that period where Palpatine came back that one time, and then anyway,
somehow Palpatine returned,
right? And then we get to later on, and you see with this story how much people mined from this, how much the later movies in the sequel trilogy just almost entire scenes from this book, and it being a Star Wars comic that isn't trying to mirror the movies in terms of art style. It's not something where it's tracing over actors' likenesses. It's something where it's got very distinct art style. It's got something where it's just got a weird vibe to it of they were kind of doing whatever they wanted, and it just feels so alien, but it feels really true at the same time. So I think it's an interesting book to talk about, and I think this is a good time as any to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm gonna sound like really harsh on this, so I'll preface it with I did somewhat enjoy this. But it does seem that, like, if you're going to stick to, you know, the immediate aftermath of the Empire, you kind of only have so many creative directions you can go in, and a lot of it does start to feel like rinse and repeat. So the idea of, like, kind of grounding yourself so firmly in the aftermath of the Galactic Civil War does just kind of, you know, limit you creatively. You know, maybe this had other ideas, or maybe the sequel trilogy could have mined from something else, but it just seems like you either have to resurrect the Emperor, which kind of undercuts the movies and like the emotional satisfaction of the ending of the original trilogy, or you have to just create a threat outside of what was happening before, which is like what all the Thrawn stuff has done, from what my limited understanding is. So it does seem like if you're not going to commit to doing like a time jump, you kind of are limited very much creatively. And I find it interesting that, you know, something could be inspired by this, but also end up just fucking aping it so hard in so many ways. I mean, the fucking planet destroyers in this aren't Star Destroyers with a Death Star cannon on them, but fuck, they might as well be. They're just slow. Like, oh, they're like I kind of got hype about it at first because they were kind of cool with the idea of like they just have factories in them and they just like suck up the material and start spitting out fighters and stuff. That was kind of dope.
Right.
But then they just seem like they're just taking a really long time to do their job. You could have just killed Mon Calamari and probably been better off.
That's why I thought it was funny, because they have that line where they're just like, it's even more deadly than the Death Star. I don't know, Death Star was pretty efficient. That shit was like
you might have taken some time to charge up.
Yeah,
but like,
once it charged, you were good to go. So I don't know. I think that was some anti-Tarkin propaganda right there from the real Tarkin heads. You know, I feel like they were trying to get some political agenda in.
Steve, what do you think of this?
I mean, it's better than Rise of Skywalker. Let me get this out of the way. I love Cam Kennedy. He's an incredible artist. He did some really, really great stuff in Rogue Trooper with 2000 AD, and he did a bunch of Judge Dredd comics, and him and John Wagner would later go on to do some stuff together later with DC. And then Tom Veitch is also a really interesting writer. Like he had the impossible task of following Morrison on Animal Man after Morrison basically broke Animal Man. And as difficult as that was, he did as good of a job as you possibly could have given those circumstances. It's not a great run, but it's basically the only thing you could have done after Morrison. So I appreciate Tom Veitch, and I love Cam Kennedy. I thought this was pretty bad. It signaled to me in a real depressing way of like, oh, Star Wars was out of ideas immediately. Because it's just rehashing, like you said, stuff that we've already seen before. But it also has like this fundamental problem that I attributed, I guess erroneously, to a lot of the Disney stuff, which I guess has just always really been there, which is the world is not motivated by the story the writers and artists want to tell or the ideas they want to explore. The world is motivated for its own sake, and then stories are spun out of it when possible. And because of that, so much of this book is not actual character drama. It's not actual like moment to moment interesting conflicts or evolutions of characters. It's cliff note after cliff note after cliff note of stuff the book doesn't want to take the time to develop, but wants to speed run through. When I first read through this, I felt like I missed a bunch, and then I realized that at the end, the end notes are actually like data pages. They're actually part of the story, and they tell you
Oh
things
shit!
that you're supposed to know issue to issue.
I skipped all
Right.
those too.
Yeah, and then I went back and read them, and I'm like, where the hell was this in the comic? There's one where after Leia discovers that Luke's gone to the dark side, quote unquote, she gets back on the Millennium Falcon with Han, and they all leave. And there's a data page where where they mention that Leia is overcome with grief about what's happened to Luke, and that Luke doesn't understand what he's fallen into. And I'm like, well, where the fuck was that scene in the comic? You could have actually turned that into like a sequence of panels. There's a bit where Leia takes control of the Millennium Falcon, so because she wants to use the Force to guide them to Luke. And Han's like, no, you can't do that. It's dangerous here. But she takes control anyway. You want to know how long this dangerous plot of her piloting the Falcon in enemy territory lasts? One panel.
About two
It's
panels.
precisely one panel of her taking the controls and arriving at Palpatine's location. It's just so truncated, and it's got so many things it wants to throw at you. And I think the only thing that salvages this is Cam Kennedy's an incredible artist. I had a really hard time.
Really interesting. Yeah. The art style is really interesting. There's some panels that do just look fantastic. And it's interesting to like couple it with, you know, what we know now, because some of the panels of Luke like retroactively look like Anakin's Sith eyes and shit.
Yeah.
It's great.
And that,
So cool.
yeah, that was really cool. But yeah, like I'm more middle of the road on it, because while I agree with you, Steve, and I have my own problems with it, some of the ideas I do have to like remind myself are new for when they came out.
Sure. Yeah.
So I'm like, I'm really colored by Rise of Skywalker here, and I'm not sure if it's like entirely Rise of Skywalker's fault. Like, again, I'm not sure how much of this is they clearly read this and then just decided to ape it, and how much of it is, well, if you're gonna do a Palpatine resurrection story, you really only have so many routes you can go down. So I'm like torn on that, where it's gonna feel like believable to the story outside of just, no, I just like grabbed something down the shaft, like it's safety, you know, come on.
Yeah, and I mean,
fucking robot chicken shit.
In the interest of not just being like hyperbolic, I will say one thing that I really like about this that most Star Wars synths I think doesn't seem to do well is this is legitimately a sci-fi comic with sci-fi ideas. This is pulling extremely from early 2000 AD stuff in the design. The voices of the characters are not one-to-one with the movies. The stuff about like the dark side and Palpatine being so powerful that it corrupts his body and he needs to hop into new clones every so often. The fact that
when he asks her to put him in bed, that was like my favorite scene in the whole series.
Yeah, like there is an attempt here to like infuse new ideas into Star Wars. It just suffers to me because it feels like all the new stuff gets crammed into a story that essentially just repeats the cycle of every Star Wars thing since, and it doesn't have the time to do both, so it chooses the comfort food instead of the new stuff.
I would tend to agree with you. Alfie, how are you landing on this, like, quality-wise?
I think basically everything you say is correct. I guess it just doesn't bother me as much because I am here for just how much of a showcase this is visually for Star Wars, and I really like a lot of like the ship designs and like the expressions you get here, and kind of like how ethereal they make the Force look with so many different things. So like you could literally remove all the words from this book and it wouldn't change my opinion on that kind of thing. I just like it as just kind of like a series of Cam Kennedy Star Wars panels, like that's primarily what I get from it. But as this narrative as well, I think it is repeating the greatest hits. It is trying to go back to the well of the Return of the Jedi stuff and come from it. But here, because it's just like a comic that they released, it just feels, I don't know, a little less sacrilegious to me, because it feels much more in the vein of there was an interview where they talked about like being inspired by like Flash Gordon specifically, of like the Flash Gordon's main arch nemesis keeps coming back. I like the idea that someone would walk away, especially now, like Darth Vader is like the primary villain of Star Wars, like in terms of people's like cultural conception of him, right? I like the idea of like they kind of imagined at the end of Return of the Jedi, like, oh, Luke and the Emperor, that's his actual villain, that's his actual bad guy, and I quite like Luke and Palpatine's dynamic, so I like getting more of that. Even though we don't really need more of that, it's like one of those things where it's like just like a cake. It's like I don't like eating cake. Like I like eating like some of the conflict. I like the kind of I have him by the balls because he can't fucking kill me. And then I like that opening scene in issue 2 where he's just like, yeah, I've seen you've grown strong. You now have the wisdom of the masters that you don't. However, because you now have that wisdom, you now know exactly what I am. Whereas before, you were a little bit more gung-ho to my face because you didn't quite realize what you were dealing with until you were getting struck with lightning and your dad had to save you. Like, I like that. I like that as an arc for him where now that he's gained more knowledge and mastery, it's kind of neutered him in a way that he didn't when he had less. I think that's a really interesting concept to do for like a Jedi character for Luke. I like the idea of how much Leia gets a focus in this as being someone that is a Jedi, is going on her training, is kind of instrumental to this. That's one of my biggest issues with basically every sequel Star Wars story, canon and non-canon, is they completely just feels like Leia gets the short end of the stick the entire fucking time. So I like that this book gives Leia a lot of focus, and she gets fucking a lightsaber, and she gets to push Palpatine off his bed. It's funny, like crack me up there.
That was so funny.
And then he cools down, and he's just like, this was according to my plan. And he's like, it's just like really.
Oh shit! She stole my fucking cube, bitch.
Yeah. So there's a lot. It's just a charming book to me, and I'm always curious whenever we go back to like prequel Star Wars expanded stuff where like because the prequels for me I think really solidified like what Star Wars is in terms of like after the prequels everything kind of feels a little bit more in like the same mold. Here it really does feel like they talk about the Jedi almost like they're a race, which I think is interesting. They talk about like the Force and like the Empire, like the rebel leaders are like very like, hey, if Luke's to the dark side, we're doomed. And it's like, it's just a very different conception of like you said, Steve, at the start, it feels a lot more like a 2000 AD. It feels a lot more like a straight up sci-fi story than a lot of things that would come, and so because of that, it has a novelty to it, has a charm to it, and I do just like it's like that kind of and it makes fun of it all the time for me, but I do just kind of like the power fantasy aspect of it. I'm just like, you get to see I know Mark Hamill had that thing where he's like, Luke gets his license to kill, he gets to be James Bond at the end of Return of the Jedi, but you never get to see him do shit afterwards. I like the fact that you get to see him in this fight fucking Palpatine naked, and then Palpatine beats him in the leg. It just feels like a real like big escalation, and I like that for this specific medium, for a specific comic drawn by Cam Kennedy, because he can depict that in a way that's interesting, and it doesn't just become big explosions and noise. It feels, when you're reading the physical pages, like you're almost having like an acid trip, and I think that's a really interesting idea for like a Star Wars depiction of like the highest of the high. So I enjoy it a lot. I don't think, again, this has any real like depth to mine into, but I do think it's a fun kind of like novelty of its time, especially as it's aged in comparison to all the stuff that came after.
What I think is what's kind of difficult about this book is like it does sort of feel like it's a what's the word? It's like it's at a fork in the road for Star Wars, where you could have gone down the path that we eventually lead to with the prequels and the sequels, and Alfie, like you said, where everything sort of feels like it's of the same flavor once George Lucas comes back and solidifies what his idea of the canon should be. Or you could have gone down this other route where the fact that the Jedi are space wizards is very explicit, that they are just essentially doing magic, and they talk about curses and just things that seem like would be heresy to any modern Star Wars fan at this point. And I appreciate like Tom Veach and Cam Kennedy kind of spinning their wheels about this stuff. I think the problem is just as the big sort of return to these characters and following up on the or on Return of the Jedi, there's just not enough of like an actual character-driven story here to feel like it warrants much like critical discussion, because it's just making like a showcase for the world. And like you said, you enjoy that part of it. You enjoy the world building of it and the path not traveled with a lot of this stuff. But if you're not into that, like if you're not into what Star Wars could have been, or the state of the New Republic, or the civil wars in the Empire, and then they all coalesce again because Palpatine's back, so whatever. Like if you're not into that, then this just feels like a clip show. And I think that's where I really struggle with this, because there's no attempt here to tell like a real character driven story. This is all like plot driven and lore driven, and it really bothers me, because I think what works about good EU stuff is that they're able to do that where the lore comes a little bit more naturally, because they're not worried about being connected to the movies after a certain point. Like the John Ostrander Dark Horse Star Wars Legacy stuff that's like set hundreds of years in the future, it doesn't care about any of the movies, and you can sense that as you're reading it, because he's just creating his own characters and he's just doing his own thing with his world. But as you go through this, like, well, there's no Death Star, but there's something better than a Death Star. And you remember Jabba the Hutt? Well, now you're on the planet of the Hutts. And you remember Palpatine? Well, here's Palpatine. And
but he's
that's
15
and Boba Fett.
naked.
And Boba Fett's here, yeah. Like there's just a bit of like, oh, so Star Wars has kind of always just been this well of fan service. I want to push back a little bit on the Leia thing too, because I agree with you. Most of the EU stuff, both pre-Disney and post-Disney, always throws Leia under the bus, and she doesn't get anything to do except be an incubator for Skywalker babies. And she gets a lightsaber here, which is cool. But her real relevance is that she's an incubator for Skywalker babies, and that bothers me. Like, that's basically all it comes down to, and that's what Dark Empire 2 is all about by the time you get to that.
Yeah, that's why the sequels for this really lose that they feel very much like, if this is already kind of like you said, Steve, like running on fumes, like not really much original creative. By the time you get to 2 and 3, it's like, oh, we are completely
and like
scraping the bottom of the barrel.
At least I 2 is still drawn by Cam Kennedy. The third one doesn't even have Cam Kennedy.
I know, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
It's really sad.
Yeah. Okay, I have a question for both of you. It's been a while since I've been reading comics, so maybe I'm just a bit rusty, but I started this book. I started issue 1 around 8 o'clock last night, maybe 8:15. I finished about 10:15, so, 2 hours to read all 6 issues. But how long did it take you guys to chug through these? Did you do them all in one sitting, or did you spread it out? Could you give me like an estimated on total time spent?
I split it into 2 nights, so I did the first 3 issues yesterday and the third 3 issues today, and if you combine the times, it was about 2 hours, yeah.
Okay.
For me, it was about an hour. I did it after I got at work around 4 and then finished around 5, so it was about an hour.
Okay, so you're just a quicker reader on it. It's just interesting because, Steve, you were talking about the pacing of it, and like, it really is trying to be its own movie. And it is like it reads roughly the same length as a film. If you average our times out, like you get what an hour and a half, hour and 45 minutes then total, which is about the length of one of the Star Wars movies, in that, you know, sub 2 to maybe 2:30 range. And so it takes all the same, you know, roughly speaking, the same amount of time to complete this story, but it really doesn't feel like you're getting the same level of meat you do out of any of the Star Wars movies, new or old. And I just think there's something really fascinating about that, because like when I was reading this, there was like a temptation, like, well, I'm not really interested in all the like military side of this stuff, but I am kind of interested in like the Palpatine dynamic and the like Force stuff. So there was part of me that was tempted to just kind of like skip around, but then as I was kind of going, I was realizing, no, they're really trying to take notes from Lucas and really get into showing these like multiple threads of a story all kind of coming together to tell one story. They don't do as good a job of it, which is saying something, because Lucas doesn't always even pull it off. Lucas often doesn't pull it off, let me say. So you get like all these different threads trying to come together, but, you know, arguably only one of them feels like it's got any interest, because, you know, the subplot of that is of the least importance would be like the crime underworld stuff, and that the conclusion to that is just, and then Boba Fett said, "I'll get you next time, Solo." And then the secondary plot is the Mon Calamari siege, which is just kind of like happening in the background.
Yeah. The Mon Calamari stuff really annoyed me, because it felt like that was the ticking time clock for the sake of the story, right? Like the way you build drama throughout this is the Mon Calamari are being attacked, and they're being attacked by brand new state-of-the-art ships no one's ever seen before, and we got to do something to stop them. Okay, well, what do we do to stop them? Well, we need to do something to get Luke Skywalker back to us, because he's the only guy that can help us through this. But Luke Skywalker's been seduced by the dark side or whatever. Okay, cool. That's your story. You got Luke and Leia, you got Leia and Han on the Falcon, and they're going to try and do everything they can to get Luke Skywalker back on the right side of the Force, while the Mon Calamari are being exterminated, and the Rebels try and stop it. But the way the story is structured is that it doesn't give you any sense whatsoever of the amount of damage that is being done or what the stakes are on the planet. Like, if they didn't keep telling me in dialogue that Mon Calamari was under siege, it wouldn't fucking matter. There's a bit that really bothers me where Lando, I think, is the one who notices that, like, one of the new ships has basically blown itself up. And he's like, it's almost like they wanted to lose. And then you read the data pages, and the data pages are like, oh, it's because Luke's not actually on the dark side. He's just pretending to be on the dark side so that he can sabotage what's happening. Then you get to the next issue, and that's exactly what's happening. But the story hasn't done anything to like build that up as a mystery, because the second he turns to the dark side, you're like, oh yeah, he's faking it. I got it. I understand his plan completely. And then because you know Luke's not really on the dark side, there's not a whole lot of drama invested in this Mon Calamari thing, because the only information you get is that they are being attacked, but don't worry, Luke is sabotaging them from within, so why do I care? And then when they actually meet Luke, and it turns out that he tried to pretend to be on the dark side, but actually he might kind of be seduced, they fumble the emotional stakes of that so hard that I had such a hard time caring about what exactly his plan was or what the point of any of this was. Because it seems like what the idea is supposed to be is that he goes to the dark side because he wants to learn the ways of the dark side to kind of be closer to his father and become stronger and not be tempted in the future. Which, like, okay, fair, cool. There's a really nice visual when Luke's first introduced and his silhouette is just Darth Vader. Like, that's fucking awesome. I'm here for that. And then once you get to Dark Side Luke, there's really nothing interesting happening with Dark Side Luke, because he is both half in and half out from the second you follow him.
it doesn't feel like he's ever actually struggling. There doesn't feel like a moment where he's like actually being tempted. It's just he's just putting on the illusion of it. You know what I think might have helped the Mon Calamari thing is if you got to see these things just destroy a different planet. You know, make it Alderaan 2 or something. Just like get to see, like, we got to stop building Alderaans. It's not working out, guys. You get to like actually show the damage of the threat before you then have them approaching Mon Calamari, and then in the climax have them land on Mon Calamari. So like then you really get the sense of that ticking time bomb. The fact that they're just there, like what, from issue 2, that they show up on Mon Calamari, or is it even still all the way back in issue 1?
I think it's issue 3 when they turn up, because
okay, I guess that helps a little bit. It feels like it's just there the whole time.
Yeah.
It just like it doesn't feel like there's any weight to it. They're just kind of taking their time. You know what it makes me think of all things is Multiverse of Madness, the second Doctor Strange film, where like they build up the idea of the Illuminati in that film so that it's like really impressive when Scarlet Witch comes in and like kills all of them. But because you only see all of them die in like hilariously painful ways, it just kind of feels like a joke.
Yeah.
And it probably would have helped if, instead of just like showing or like telling you that they beat Thanos, if you just got to like actually see them beat Thanos, that probably would have like solved the problem of, you know, actually do a better job establishing the threat. Don't just tell us that the threat exists. That might have helped. I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's a good suggestion. I wonder, like, because they say this was in development for like 2 years. They had like, this was like a thing behind it. They had like the Dark Empire source book. They had like RPG sets. Like this was like a wave when it first came out. Like they were like, so like, I wonder how much of that was creatively like, let's try and create a pacing story versus how much was this, we want to revitalize Star Wars. We want to just cram in as much stuff as possible so we can just spin off it. And then it's funny that then this wasn't the thing that people spit off it. It was the other thing that came out the same year. So like, it's kind of like to the point where you have a fucking another solo kid in this, where the other 2 solo kids are born, and they have to throw in just a line in here. It's like, oh, but the twins are on a different planet. So like, we just have to explain why Han and Leia are looking after their babies while the third one's on the way. So there's a lot of stuff like that I feel like are completely valid critiques, and it's funny that we did eventually get a remake of the story that is also compromised by committee in kind of the same way. So like, it just something about it, man. It feels that's why I like talking about it, even though I agree with all of your points, where it's like it's not something you can really critically mine into. But I think almost just like as a piece of history of pop culture of like where shit went and how big of an impact Star Wars had on that, to now where it feels like Star Wars has no impact whatsoever. It's interesting to look at the Palpatine returns as almost like 2 nexus points, where like one completely like put a burst of energy into the Star Wars franchise from the 90s all the way to the 2000s, the prequels, and then the other one completely seemed to have killed all the momentum in the world it could have had. So it's really, really interesting that happened twice, you know?
Yeah, and it's interesting.
If I had a nickel for every time Palpatine returned from the dead, I would have 10 cents. And it's not a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice.
I like that in here as well. He's like, oh no, I do this shit all the time. Like, I look at the first piece, he's like, oh no, yeah, I've died many times before. I was like, when did you die?
It just undercuts the emotion so hard.
It does, yeah.
And then like, yeah, again, and then when you add like the prequel knowledge, you died like 10 times in 20 years? What the fuck happened, man?
One thing that the book doesn't, again, it doesn't do a lot with, but an idea that I did like was the Palpatine clone reincarnation, as like evil anti-Yoda, I think is interesting, because Yoda is the greatest Jedi of all time. He lived for 900 years. He never craved more power. And you read the data pages at the end of each issue, and they talk about the difference between the light side and the dark side of the Force, and this idea that the dark side seduces you because it gives you visible power immediately, so it doesn't feel like you have to work for the harder skills, whereas the light side makes you understand that it's a long ruling road to get the sort of power that comes with understanding the Force properly. And so Yoda doesn't ever do anything super impressive, but he gets to live for 900 years and be known as the greatest Jedi of all time, versus Palpatine, who does all this impressive shit, but he can't even stay alive and he has to keep cloning his bodies. And maybe there's an alternate universe where like Yoda and Palpatine are the same age. But I like that parallel. I think that's one of those things where if the story was more interested in Luke being an actual Sith or actually being tempted by the dark side, that would be one of the threads you'd want to see more of, because it introduces this notion of he gets trained by Yoda and the anti-Yoda. And they're both the two greatest examples of what the Force can be on two extremes. And then he himself has to decide what he wants to do after that point forward. Once again, it doesn't do a whole lot with it, but I like that notion for Palpatine. And I wish that the Palpatine stuff with Luke, like you said, with like Flash Gordon style, if he just got a chance to like have more time with Palpatine or fight him more often, and he turned into this like recurring foil of like, you only hung out with Yoda once and he immediately died, but Palpatine's gonna be a stick in your craw for your entire life.
Yeah, I think that's interesting. I think I like the stuff in here, especially as well. That they have that thing about the lightsabers, right? Where like Palpatine beats Luke, and then he at the end like Luke disarms Palpatine, and he has that line of like, "I'm tired of your Jedi dueling games." And that's the kind of the thing. Like a lot of people talk about the prequels, where they're like, "Oh, I wish Palpatine and Yoda never used a lightsaber." I think it's funny that this comic kind of was ahead of the game on that one, where like they let him do it. And then when they beat him with it, he's like, "Oh, that shouldn't matter." And I think that's funny. I quite like that idea that he's just like that lightsaber shit is just for fun. I just do it to humor y'all. I think that's a fun idea to play with it, because there's some truth in it, and there's some truth that he's just it's the dark side, it's bullshit. What you talked about as well, Steve, where you were talking about like the dark side is almost like it's parlor trick. That you can be the edgelord, god tier. You can just wipe people out. You can kill people. You have power over material things, but you do not have power over the spiritual world, and the spiritual world is unseen to people that are blind to it, cannot see. So it feels like you're weaker, when in actuality you're like so far ahead of them. I really like that concept. I think that's a really interesting kind of like martial arts theme, spirituality themed kind of life lesson that's very in tune to like the best parts of Star Wars. So I do wish that got some more play. I wish that got some more play through Leia and Luke's immediate anger and like seeking the immediate results versus kind of the lessons of Ben and Yoda, where they're like, no, like this stuff will work itself out. You just kind of have to trust the universe, which is like the hardest thing to do in like the face of this kind of thing. Like all of that stuff, I do think there are interesting ideas that like thematically consistent with the original trilogy. It just doesn't really get explored at all outside of just acknowledgement.
So Leia, yeah, I agree with Steve earlier about Leia on the idea of, it looks like she's going to do more, but then she's just a womb for more Skywalker babies. I was a bit surprised, Alfie, when you told me that this is like the first EU thing, because they mentioned that she's already had twins that just aren't anywhere to be found, which is a bit funny. So I was a little confused on that.
They had the novel Heir to the Empire come out, but it came out prior, but this comic was in development first, and so they edited this comic before it dropped in the same year to include that line, because they both had the idea of like, well, Han and Leia are gonna have a kid, right? And one of them got to jump the gun ahead of time and give their own kids, so that it kind of then became a running gag that the Anakin Solo, the son in this book, was kind of like the redhead stepchild of the Solo family, because then Jaina and Jason, they got all these novels and all these adventures, and Anakin Solo was just kind of, I'm also here. I'm the child from Dark Empire, and then he's the one they kill off eventually, which is fucking wild. So like, it felt like kind of the novel guys maybe had a little bit of beef with the comic guys. It's like, no, our children are more important than this fucking Dark Empire baby. We're not dealing with you.
So fun fact, I got to talk to John Jackson Miller a few years ago when he was at Con, and he wrote a bunch of Marvel Star Wars comics that have recently become available in print, and he also did a bunch of Star Wars novels. So like he was on both sides of it, and when I was talking to him about I was talking to him about Iron Man, obviously, but when we pivoted to Star Wars at some point in the conversation, but I was talking to him a bit about like how he dipped his toes in both waters, and he mentioned what you did of like there is these two different worlds that operate between the comic publishing side of it and the novel side of it, even though they're both being overseen by Lucasfilm, because clearly one's being evaluated and edited to a higher degree than the other, and it's really clear through the history of Marvel's licensed properties that they didn't give a shit about publishing Star Wars comics, especially by the time like this rolls around, because this was supposed to be a Marvel comic and then eventually gets moved to Dark Horse. So I wonder like if that beef has since been resolved now that most of the Star Wars stuff is sort of more in line with each other. But certainly around this era, there was definitely a lot of fighting back and forth between what the novels were going to do and what the comics were going to do. And it's also partly why like so many of the comics take place in like completely nebulous points in the past and future that no novel needs to touch, and where you don't have to worry about the canon established by the novels.
Yeah, it's also funny, a little bit of history. This is the first visual depiction of Coruscant. Imperial City is Coruscant. They just the name hadn't showed up yet, but that's where it's meant to be. That Luke drops the Star Destroyer onto Coruscant, which is funny.
Fuck you, Star Killer.
Just like his dad.
Exactly.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting one. We also haven't talked much about like the Boba Fett criminal underworld subplot.
Yeah, that shit's just again. I don't blame you for feeling the urge to skip over that shit. Yeah, and it's just kind of like, all right, Boba Fett looks cool as fucking the art style. It's neat. But like
it gets such a Boba Fett always gets such cool shit, so I understand why people like him. But then like when you actually look at it, none of it has any cool follow through.
Yeah,
just like the fact that one issue ends is just a Mr. Fett to see you, sir, and it's just like, oh, what a fucking great cliffhanger. Could you imagine like, you know, reading that on the stands at the time, like, oh shit, you know, like imagine it in the modern context, it'd be all over Twitter, it'd be great. But now then you read it, it's just like, and then we ran away.
Yeah.
And he chased us. He did what he always does. The end.
He fumbled the bag.
I heard someone talking about Boba Fett recently, and I don't know if this is true, but it is concerning how readily I believe it. Apparently, at some point in between Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, Mark Hamill pitched to George Lucas that it should be revealed Boba Fett is Luke's mother.
Yeah, I remember that.
And if that doesn't just tell you how like great of a sense of storytelling Mark Hamill has, I don't know what else would.
Really fucking funny.
Oh man, that's great. I don't remember who wrote these, but the stuff with the Solo kids, where like one of them goes to the dark side and the other one becomes Jedi, and they have a big face-off. Like, I think it was the Legacy of the Force novels.
Yeah, correct. Those were the post-prequel ones.
That's right. Yeah, and Boba Fett comes back in that, and he basically saves the day at the end. So like he gets more cool stuff to do since this, But I remember when I read the issue earlier today, because I had forgotten that the robot was saying Mr. Fett at the end of issue 3, and I opened the first page of issue 4. I'm like, what the fuck is Boba Fett doing here? Let me go back and read the previous issue.
Boba Fett.
It was very
People
strange.
like Boba Fett.
He probably, you know what,
people-
out of every character, I feel like maybe that's been lost a little bit since the series, but I do think there used to be a equivalent of Boba Fett was like the funniest character to just drop in. It was like a jump scare. I'd just be like, this is Boba Fett. Like, imagine watching Attack of the Clones and just you see the Boba. I was like, wait, what the fuck? Like, I just feel like there's like, one of the video games recently as well. There's like a mission where like you're doing like bounty hunt and shit, and then you're about to fight a boss, and then in the middle of the boss fight, Boba Fett shows up and then captures your boss, and is like, "All right, I'm taking this for the bounty. See you, kid." And like, it's awesome. It's fucking awesome, but it's also just like he's like the funniest characters to randomly just drop in and be like, "Oh, that's Boba Fett. Okay, bye, Boba Fett." Like, just no explanation, no anything.
I remember when the Clone Wars cartoon was still running on Cartoon Network, and the season that brought Boba Fett into the series, where he's trying to kill Mace Windu for killing his dad. All of the trailers for everything leading up to that new season premiere was like, Boba Fett is coming to Clone Wars, and they would just show a fucking 8-year-old, and then he's so in it for like one episode.
Yeah.
It's a good episode, though.
It's a good episode. It's a good episode. It's
funny as fuck, though.
It is.
Yeah. I don't know. There's something to the to Boba Fett just as a character. He's just always got to show up and fucking do nothing. It's his fate. Yeah, I don't know. I like things about this, but Boba Fett definitely wasn't one of them. Did you guys have like this was legitimately like something that they should have done, or do you think they kind of like picked all the best bits out of this and just also didn't do it very well in the end?
The biggest thing that I say I wish they should have done is if they were gonna copy like what you said up front with like the Star Destroyers having like the big Death Star lasers and stuff like that. My biggest thing that of all the stuff they're gonna take from this, I wish they took more of the ship design and the location from this, where it's just so fucking different. Where it's just like this weird kind of like blocky, gigantic scale, like weirdly shaped versions of shit that's like it's sort of familiar, but then like the world devastators don't look like anything we've seen in Star Wars before. And like imagining some of this on screen, I think would be really impressive visually. I wish they had taken more of that instead of just doing, and here's the First Order using Star Destroyers again. Like I wish they had taken more interesting and different ship design and location design. Like with like they kind of go to like Exegol here, the Abyss in this, and like he's got like these weird guard things around Palpatine, and it just everything feels like it's where the new is comes from the new locales and new locations that don't look anything like you've seen in the movies, but still kind of fit. I wish we had.
Yeah, we didn't do
that.
like a fucking desert planet again.
Exactly. I wish we had.
I guess
more of
be the
that.
first time we get to. This would be the first time we got like Mon Calamari, the water world, then too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And like the crime planet, like it feels more routine now, but at the time that been really fucking fresh, like getting to see that kind of stuff. So like that's what I wish we had gotten in the sequels, especially. Is I just wish more visual diversity in the filming locations and the designs of the ships and like the weaponry and stuff.
A lot of that design work that Cam Kennedy does, like he does a similar stuff in Rogue Trooper, because it's also set in the future and is in the middle of a sci-fi war, and so you get weird ship designs and technology and stuff in that too. But Kennedy's art in both of these things are very much influenced by like French sci-fi stuff like Mobius, and so you see a real similar aesthetic to this. And we were talking about The Fifth Element last week. and the Fifth Element borrows from the same sources. They both, Star Wars and Fifth Element, both share that Mobius DNA. But then also like H.R. Geiger and Alien does too. So like these heavy black lines, these sort of asymmetrical shapes, these non-aerodynamic objects being aerodynamic. Basically, this idea that everything is embodying something that seems contradictory to its aesthetic, and so it gives everything a sense of like imminent weird disbelief and danger. Rogue Trooper does this a lot too, because Rogue Trooper is set on New Earth, and so New Earth is a planet that's been in a war for so long that the actual atmosphere and the things that live there have become inhospitable to humans. And so if you're down there, you have to wear like a chem suit and just be guarded from the atmosphere itself because it's so fucked up. And so you get weird things like glass mountains or plants that can kill you, and like that kind of that sort of like contradictory function and design thing is really interesting. Star Wars never really goes in that direction, but you're right. If they did more of that, I think a lot of that would just come down to like it would be cool if more of those aesthetic influences were allowed to be put into the movies instead of just repeating the designs we'd seen in other Star Wars.
For sure. Do you have anything, Ian, that you're like, oh, I wish they did this?
I liked the Jedi that survived the purge, but isn't doing anything. Is
like,
just fucking miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like that's kind of an underrated. Like it's just such a trope now. It's beginning to feel like Order 66 just meant nothing. Like they only killed like, you know. At this point, it feels like Order 66 was more about, like, purging the Council and the Temple than, like, killing all the Jedi, if that makes sense. Because, like, you know, so many of them went off to become Inquisitors, and there's the ones that didn't go off to become Inquisitors just, like, you know, went and joined the Rebellion or helped create the Rebellion and were hunted by Vader, and they just got missed whenever we need another in-between 3 and 4 story. It is beginning to feel like how many really died? There weren't that many to begin with. That's like a key fucking plot element from episode 2 is that like there was, you know, only a couple thousand Jedi in the whole galaxy, so they couldn't just be an army for a massive war. And so, you know, when you've gotten like, it's like the fucking list I wanted to make of how many people know Bruce Wayne is Batman. Like, how many fucking Jedi survived Order 66? It feels like too many. And so it's just silly. So, like, it's a bit tired to do it now, but just the idea of one existing and just being miserable, as opposed to, like, having gone off and done anything, I kind of like. I feel like we've gotten a lot of the other elements have been kept or utilized somewhere else. There's an interesting blend that they do with a lot of the like rebel factions on different planets of like the rebels are more like at one with nature. So I liked the big fucking bat creature things just being like the escorts for the ships. I thought that was kind of cool. Yeah. We've gotten stuff like that, particularly in like Rebels with the fucking weird spider things and the Bantu. So there's some stuff here and there that I liked, but no, I think most of the stuff was just kind of bad, or just not utilized as well as it could be. Like the fight with Luke and Palpatine in the clone chamber when he's like trying to kill all the clones. I feel like instead of Palpatine's dying and now I'm gonna go kill all the clones before he can jump into one, I think it should have been more of like a process of fighting Palpatine as he's trying to get into one. Would have been like a cooler way to do that, you know?
That kind of comes down to too. I just feel like there's so much in this that it's too truncated for like a 6-issue miniseries.
Yeah,
a page or two, but that's a thing that you feel like you should devote more time to. It would have been cool if the Star Wars sequels and prequels and the EU from here on out devoted more time to just the weird space wizardy stuff. Like I like that, like you mentioned early on, Alfie, that the Force has like a weird sort of ethereal outline to it in this, where it's like they're literally shooting laser beams at each other, or like the fact that Luke's outfit is not one to one what he was wearing at the end of Return of the Jedi. It actually seems more like he's wearing like a proper cloak, and Palpatine also just wearing like his big black cloak, but feeling more like an evil wizard, when the way he's moving around and the way he's shooting stuff out of his hands and stuff. It would have been neat to see more of that, because I think what bores me about so much like prequel era Star Wars is when you turn the Jedi into just like politicians and soldiers, it's just not cool anymore, man. Like, it's cool that they can bend the universe to their will and they have laser swords. Like, it's cool that they're just walking around and philosophizing about nature and life forces and stuff, and also they have laser swords. So, like, if there's anything I hate, more than anything in the modern aesthetic of Star Wars, it's that Obi-Wan style the Jedi wear a hybrid of clone armor and robes. That just bugs me so much, and I wish we could.
But I'm sorry, that just goes so fucking hard. You're wrong. You're
don't
wrong
like
for
it.
that one.
I don't like it, and I wish that this book's like aesthetic choice of just the Jedi are weird wizards, and Luke works in mysterious ways because he thinks he's God, and he can't explain his rationale to you. Or like Leia just sees Luke's silhouette in the skyline as she's thinking about where he is. Like, that kind of stuff would go really, really hard in a proper Star Wars movie now.
I agree with both of you, and that's what I like. I like that both can exist. I think both serve a purpose, but I do also agree with you, Steve. I feel like they're leaning way harder into one type of thing, as like this is what it must always be, instead of I liked when you had different shit going on at the same time, but like the Force Unleashed came out and then nothing else had to be the Force Unleashed, but that was its own thing. And then you had like I like different mediums having different things, or even just different stories. Like you had Gandhi Clone Wars, and like that did its own thing. I really like when we can do that. I don't like the commodifying of it all into just one. This is how it must always be, and if you do deviate from this slightly, then you're breaking canon. I think that's lame.
Oh! Can I mention something real quick that pisses me off about Last Jedi?
Go ahead.
Now that I've read this, because you just mentioned it basically, but people were so mad about this notion that Luke could project himself across space, and then he does it in this. That's so fucking cool.
What's so fucking funny about this though is he does it like it's no big thing here, and
right.
then Last Jedi fucking kills him. Like that shit's fucking like. I feel really bad for fucking Canon Luke, because I like his Last Jedi stuff a lot, but it's starting to get a little bit like the Virgin versus Chad meme at this point. Where it's like,
I mean, that was my thing that always kind of irked me about like Legacy Luke, though, legitimately, is Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy kind of fucking sucks and loses every time. Like, he beats Vader only because Vader's so obviously like becoming conflicted and Luke is falling into the dark side. But then like he just almost dies to Palpatine and Vader has to save him. He loses to Vader in Empire. He doesn't fight anyone in New Hope. He blows up the Death Star, but like that's like his only win, like in the entire fucking thing. But yet Legacy Luke, they decided to run with that, and they go, oh, so now Luke has become Jesus and he can do any Force ability and he's the greatest Jedi ever. And I'm like, no, that was his dad. Luke fucking sucks. Like, we really need to just, like, lean into the fact that, like, Luke is terrible.
there is kind of, like, this missed opportunity of doing stuff set between the 6-year jump from this and Return of the Jedi, where we get to see Luke actually learn how to be a Jedi Master. Because he just does so much shit in this. And every time he does, I'm like, I'm not questioning the logic of this, but I am kind of just curious about, well, where the fuck did he learn it?
yeah,
like, what was he reading?
Yeah.
Like, what's happened here to give him all this knowledge? Because, like, Return of the Jedi had this deleted scene that I had on my old VHS of it, or not VHS, DVD of it, that I really loved, where he's back on Tatooine and he's in Ben's cave, and he uses the stuff in Ben's cave and the instructions to build his own lightsaber, and that's the green lightsaber he gets, and that's why it looks identical to Ben's. And I really liked that because it gave me this feeling of like, he's not a Jedi master by any stretch. He is combing through the artifacts of the Jedi and trying to figure out what that means. And so he's basically putting on airs whenever he says, "Oh, I'm a Jedi Knight," because he has no fucking idea what a Jedi Knight is. He's just sifting through the remains of Yoda and Ben that he can find here and there. And then he just shows up in this and he's OP immediately. And I'm just wondering, like, did Yoda leave him a bunch of books? Did Ben have a much bigger cave? Like, what's going on?
Yeah, I think that's stuff to do in there. I really would like if they're gonna do all these kind of things. I'm still shocked to this day they haven't made like a series about the original trilogy cast with Han, Luke, and Leia, and just get a bunch of voice actors like they did with the Clone Wars. I feel like that's like the obvious thing to do at some point, but it feels like they're really, I don't know, hesitant to it. Like they're wrapped up in their own legacy shit. But like, I don't know. I think that would be neat. I think you could do some interesting, because I think there are a lot of like, where did these guys go to this thing? And I think that's more interesting in doing the fucking. And then Luke and Leia and Han are really busy that day, so they didn't have time to show off. Or here's the AI deepfake version of Luke Skywalker. It's like, just make a fucking cartoon or something, dude. Like it's not that fucking deep.
Yeah. Especially because like the teases we've gotten of them in the shows, like Leia had that episode of Rebels, and that was a cool one. Mm-hmm. They should, they really could do that. Leia could probably be the vehicle for her own show, like real talk.
Why not?
If you
right?
wanted to do, like if you wanted to go from just how did she get to where she is at the start of A New Hope, and then just go from there. Especially now, with Carrie Fisher dead, and you can't like do a Leia movie, doing a Leia show and showing like the Jedi training and stuff would be kind of cool for her.
And they put that into the canon at this point because Return of the Jedi has that brief flashback scene where young Leia is training with a lightsaber and she's played by Carrie Fisher's daughter. So like, you've opened the door to that. It's already there. So you might as well just do something different. And if everyone is clamoring for the old cast back and everyone wants to see more Luke, Han, and Leia stuff, then that's your out. Your out is do an animated show, pick up on the Leia being trained by Luke stuff from Rise of Skywalker, make Han Solo do Han Solo things, I don't fucking know, and just turn it into animated stuff. Because like no one's turning out for this Mandalorian and Grogu shit. You're clearly not going to do anything with Rey, Finn, and Kylo Ren at this point, so just might as well use the real estate and the runway you have to do more of that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's kind of where I tend to be on it too. And it's disappointing because I liked Rey and Finn and Poe, but you know the like complete rejection of their character arcs and stuff, and what fans were responding to.
Yeah.
No, fans think they're gay. We've got to give them both girlfriends now. It's still just the fucking like studio interference reaction of all time. They could have just left it alone. Like, we're just not going to confirm that they're gay or whatever. We'll just leave it be. The fans can have that, I guess. No, we must give them both girlfriends. We've got to introduce 2 new characters in the final film and try to make them feel important now. Oh, it's such a mess. One of these days we'll have to do Rise of Skywalker because I've not seen it since theaters, and I've just like only grown to disdain it more and more over time.
Yeah,
I've also grown to dislike it more and more over time. I used to be the defender.
Yeah, you used to be the defender.
You did defend
yeah. It's just what got me about the sequel trilogy as a whole is I felt like, I could get on my soapbox and defend it, but we're like 10 years deep almost at this point, and like no one involved has ever came out and been like, you know what, I really stand. Ryan Johnson had to do a lot of it because he had the immediate backlash right after Last Jedi, and I respect The Last Jedi the most out of those three movies, but I do think just in general, it feels like everyone's kind of embarrassed about it. And I'm like, no, man, I don't want to sit there and be the only one defending your fucking movies. Like,
Yeah. No,
everything
I mean,
else with it
it's
feels like it had more of like a take. The sequel trilogy truly feels like no one involved was happy with how that came out in hindsight, and that upsets me.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
Ryan Johnson legitimately defends those movies, not just because it's good business to do that for your co-creators, but also because I think he is the only take and a legitimate idea, and he gave us a Star Wars movie for the first time in a long time that felt like it was opening the door to doing new and interesting and unique stuff with all these characters. Because, like, JJ gets credit for creating them, I guess, but their personalities and their arcs are defined by what The Last Jedi gives them, and they're all so unique and different from what the original characters were doing. And then the Rise of Skywalker is just like this patent rejection of this notion that we're allowed to do things that are different. It really feels like, and I haven't seen Mandalorian and Grogu. I don't fucking care about that movie. I'm not watching it. But it really, no matter how good or bad that movie is, it's never going to be as bad as The Rise of Skywalker, because Rise of Skywalker is the thing that I think killed Star Wars. There's no coming back from how that movie was received, and we've seen it over the last 6 or 7 years where really no one cares about Star Wars. The Disney Plus shows don't do super well outside of Andor. The one show that people had any sort of attachment to, The Acolyte, they immediately canceled. Everyone fucking forgot the Obi-Wan Kenobi show, even though that's the movie everyone wanted for like 2 decades. Boba Fett had an entire fucking TV show. Ahsoka's got a TV show. But who cares? Like, who's watching them?
Okay, let me just interject here real quick, because I am getting a thought, and I wonder if we should make this happen. Alfie, I know you haven't been able to make, like, week to week, but do you think you could pencil us in and next week we just do Rise of Skywalker?
I'd have to talk to the missus ahead of time on that one.
Okay. If
It'd
not,
be
we
fun.
can,
It would
we
be
can-
fun to do it. It would be fun to do a double feature of Dark Empire to Rise of.
Yeah, like if we need to, we can work around. It doesn't have to be Tuesday night or whatever. That's fine. But yeah, like I think that might just be where this conversation is headed. Is that we might just need to watch Rise of Skywalker
For sure.
And
I get
if
you.
I could talk just about that movie,
So-
because at this point we're so off of Dark Empire.
Fun fact for that video, Matt and I were texting the other day, and he also just rewatched Rise of Skywalker. So maybe we can rope him into this one.
That'd be fun.
That'd be
yeah.
awesome.
I'll let you guys just once I get off here, I'll ask and I'll let you guys know what that's looking like.
Cool.
All right. Sounds good. Okay, well, I think we're pretty much done on Dark Empire. Again, like I feel like maybe we're a little harsh on it, just because, in all fairness, it is just a fucking 6-issue comic that, you know, was the first thing to have to like try doing some extended universe stuff.
Right.
So, for what it is, I think it has maybe a couple more hits than misses, but you know, it's hard to look back on it and not have the context. There was one other thought I had, just random thing. When Luke's in the prison ship with R2, and he's like, they used to use these to transport Jedi back during the Clone Wars. I'm just like, man, that's so funny, because it's just not what the Clone Wars were. Anyway, so yeah, I think that does it for Dark Empire. I will give this 2.5 out of 5. 15-year-old Palpatines looking just fucking jacked.
Is he meant to be 15 though?
Yeah, that says it in the fucking like. I didn't read the notes, but I read the opening crawl, and I think it says that he's 15 in the opening crawl.
That's fucking funny as hell. I just want to imagine reading Darth Plagueis with young Palpatine. He looks like that.
I'll go ahead and give this 2 out of 5 crazy homeless Jedi women with deceptively depressing backstories.
For me, I'm gonna give this 3.5 out of 5 banger Palpatine quotes. I really love the bit where where Leia's like, "You cannot have this. It's the Jedi holocron." And he's like, "Oh, but aren't I the master of all Jedi?" Like, I think that's such a fucking sick ass Palpatine dickhead quote. I love that shit.
It was cool that the data pages like went into the compendiums of dark side knowledge that he wrote. And at one point, they're just like, "We're just gonna quote Palpatine here."
Yeah, it's sick. I love that. I love that. Dude, it's so
shit.
dumb. It's
All right.
it doesn't mean anything, but it's great.
All right, so maybe next week, or might have to wait a week and do Rise of Skywalker, but that's coming because I think that's just the time is ripe. All right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
I am the champion of the light side.
And I am the Luddite.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.